Now, on this special edition of KZI 9 News, we've all heard about it, federal job cuts. Tonight, we spoke with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden and find out how cuts at the National Weather Service could impact human safety this fire season across Western Oregon.
Plus, it's been 5 years since wildfires ravaged this Oregon community. And tonight we take a look back at the historic Labor Day fires of 2020 and what this community, among others, have learned for the future fire seasons.
And then, towards the end of the show, the official Stormtracker 9 fire season outlook, where we will take a look at this year's snowpack, drought conditions, temperatures, and where everything stands as we enter the hot and dry months of July ahead. The special edition of KZI 9 News starts right now.
Live, local, late breaking. This is a special presentation of KZI 9 News, the Fire Watch forecast, preparing you for the fire season.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Chief Meteorologist Holden LeCroy.
And I'm Meteorologist Cameron Landfield.
Over the next half hour, we are going to take a look at where we stand going into this upcoming fire season by looking back at this past winter and past fire seasons.
One of the biggest stories of this year was the historic and devastating January wildfire in Los Angeles.
And the last time we saw similar strong and windy conditions was September of 2020, when the Holiday Farm Fire tore through the Blue River community, destroying hundreds of homes in minutes.
Reporter Aaron Ariano caught us up with a third-generation resident who recounts the night it ignited and the grassroots efforts to rebuild and educate the people about wildfires.
It's not too much to say that the field that I'm standing on right now within the McKenzie Community Track is a miracle. It saved lives nearly 5 years ago during the Holiday Farm Fire. And it's evident here on the hillsides, you could still see the painful memory of that night frozen in time. Those dead, burnt-out trees still overlook the area. And for the first time in nearly 5 years, we're seeing new video of an estimated 30 people in the dark of night seeking refuge at the McKenzie Community Track as the Holiday Farm Fire surrounds them.
We are surrounded. We are at the McKenzie Track and we are surrounded.
You can hear the unusually intense winds fanning the flames as the group waited anxiously for a chance to escape, which they eventually did. This video was taken by Connie Richardson. I spoke with her husband, Cliff, about that night.
My story is only one story. There's hundreds of stories throughout this 2020 and elsewhere in the other fire zones.
But Richardson's story, just like plenty of others, is gut-wrenching, especially as darkness fell and all power and communication to lifelines was cut off.
Lane County Sheriff deputy pounded my door down. He said, "You need to go and go now." We got down to the main highway below the school here, and fire personnel at that point said, "We're trapped. We can't go east or west. There's trees blocking the highways both ways." So long story short is we ended up here at that point because it was deemed the biggest and safest immediate place to refuge.
The night this track gave protection to these residents is memorialized here on this sign. And nearly 5 years later, some homes have been rebuilt, but depending on who you ask, some trauma remains.
So I think when you get a lot of PTSD with smoke, it's understandable. It can trigger a lot of that. So smoke in the air, for instance, or high winds, or the combination of dryness, all those things trigger emotions in people, and yet we still need to keep the message rolling out there. What can we do to become more resilient? What can we do to protect ourselves against a warmer climate?
He says there is still concern over another megafire, but a lot of the fear comes from a lack of knowledge.
There's a lot of misunderstanding about fire. And unfortunately, what we see with these big fire events, we have more and more of these bigger conflagrations. We've got a couple in the state right now. And so people don't understand.
He and other locals created a grassroots Locals Helping Locals within just days of the fire. They've helped identify where help is needed most for families who were displaced. State grants have been secured to rebuild homes. And Richardson's invited officials from different agencies to stand on this field and retell the story of the Holiday Farm Fire. He's also been part of community outreach to educate others by hosting public meetings on wildfire readiness.
And unfortunately, the first go-around we had last year, nobody showed up. And so that's a message in itself that either we're not getting the message out effectively or people aren't taking it seriously enough.
But their most recent one, he estimates a few dozen showed up, a sign that Oregon remains a hotspot for wildfires and people are not taking chances. And it starts with education. The aftermath of the fire also forced them to look internally at housing affordability along the Mackenzie, which he says is why some people who lost homes are having a hard time coming back. That part of the story can be found on our website. Reporting in Vida, I'm Aaron Ariano.
While we look back on the heart-wrenching stories of previous fire seasons, preparing for the next big one is the greatest form of recovery. There is, however, one big challenge this year than previous ones. Earlier this year, it was announced that thousands of federal employees would be terminated by the current presidential administration. Those cuts affected nearly every department of the U.S. government, including the National Weather Service. KZI's Matt Templeman got the chance to talk to Oregon Senator Ron Wyden about how those cuts could impact our safety from wildfires this summer.
I'm particularly troubled by the cuts in the Weather Service, and we heard about it again today, and they haven't been able in areas to get out the weather balloons. I heard yesterday in Medford about the meteorologist who's trying to do 4 people's jobs, and I think that's really an invitation to a 5-alarm fire.
So why is weather forecasting so important around wildfires? Well, micro details provide insight into intensity, movement, and longevity of a fire. The weather balloons that Wyden mentioned, well, they are manned by meteorologists and provide detailed weather information that can be used by incident meteorologists to forecast where the fire is going and how long it will take to burn. Lack of those meteorologists could ultimately lead to gaps in data, which in return can result in unpredictable shifts of the fire lines.
As we just learned, weather forecasting can play a crucial role in determining ignition and spread of wildfires. Stormtracker meteorologist Sara Kress spoke with both the Oregon Department of Forestry and National Weather Service on how their partnership can help to prevent the spread of wildfires.
ODF is busy preparing for what this season could bring. ODF is working with partner agencies to get ready for hot and windy weather we could experience this summer. ODF's firefighters and dispatchers have started training for the upcoming season, but Natalie Weber stressed the importance of local homeowners joining in the season's preparations.
We can't come onto your private property and make it fire ready. That responsibility lies with our landowners, and so we really appreciate it when they do partner with us in that effort to be ready for fire season and have that work done ahead of time.
Weather can play a role in both the ignition and the spread of wildfires. I spoke to Natalie Weber with ODF and Tom Wright with the National Weather Service on how incident meteorologists and firefighters work together to put out wildfires.
There's what they call the fire behavior triangle on fires, and that is the 3 things that most affect fire behavior, and that's fuels, topography, and weather.
Climate forecasts, severe weather alerts, and warnings are a few things you may know the National Weather Service for. During the summer, they have additional roles you might not know about.
They'll actually set up mobile weather stations around the fire and on peak so that they can get real-time data for where our firefighters are working, and it's a huge resource.
Wildfires can change in an instant based off weather factors like wind, heat, and humidity. Other factors like thunderstorms are additional dangers to firefighters and communities. Incident meteorologists forecast these elements in a specific area to help keep these fires from getting bigger.
We'll get an order and we head right out as soon as we have that order in hand. Most of the time we're within a few hours trying to get out on those fires. We want to get there as quickly as possible to help out as much as we can.
Weather balloons like the one Tom is holding are crucial for real-time weather data and help create extremely detailed forecasts. Supercomputers at the National Weather Service gather the data from the balloon to include in new model outputs. These help create a better fire forecast for the days ahead.
You go around the corner and the weather's different, so we've got, even though we forecast for this area, we've got to go out there and see how the local weather is actually behaving. There's no substitute for being out there in the weather for trying to predict the weather there.
As we just learned, remote weather stations and the people that operate them are crucial during fire season. EWEB, Eugene's Water and Electric Board, has installed new weather stations that can also be used to monitor conditions and save lives this fire season. These new weather stations can determine wind speeds, directions, and temperatures in remote areas where there's power lines are located and routine weather observations don't typically reach.
We're at the site of EWEB's second weather station. So it was installed last summer, and it's a really good example of some of the investment work that is in the wildfire mitigation plan. You know, forecasting data is becoming more and more important to us. We need accurate localized data so people can be aware of wildfire danger.
If wind speeds reach a certain threshold or temperatures reach a certain level, they can shut off the power to reduce risk of ignition and spread of wildfire. Data from those weather stations can also be used for forecasts at the National Weather Service. It's been mild when it comes to wildfire conditions so far, but experts say lack of rainfall before July could paint a completely different outlook. How the Oregon Department of Forestry is preparing next.
And I'll explain what dry thunderstorms are and how they have a major impact on fire starts across Oregon. Coming up next.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored by Keep Oregon Green.
Were you planning on burning those yard debris piles but didn't get to it in time? That's okay. Don't risk the fine or a wildfire by burning it now illegally. With fire season here, it's actually safer to cover your burn pile with plastic and wait until the rainy fall weather returns. Your property is much more protected from wildfire this way than if you never cleared it in the first place. Prevent wildfires with the Oregon Department of Forestry. Together, we can keep Oregon green.
KEZI is celebrating high school seniors. Submit a photo of your local senior at kezi.com/community, and they may be featured on KEZI 9 News. Plus, each week we'll be giving away a giant pizza from Abby's to one graduating senior.
Congratulations, Jackson Panam from Harrisburg High School. You've won a giant pepperoni pizza from Abby's Legendary Pizza. Enter your senior now at kezi.com.
Celebrating high school seniors on KEZI 9 News. Sponsored by Abby's Legendary Pizza.
Out here, we know how to get things done. It takes an eye for the detail and a mind for the bigger picture. We treat our coworkers like family because they are. And when a neighbor needs a hand, we offer them both. And some tools and a tractor. Because out here, we know what goes around comes around. That the good we plant today, we reap tomorrow. At Tallgrass, we believe that when farmers and ranchers do well, we all do well. That's why we're supporting the Oregon FFA Foundation with a $100,000 matching gift drive. Learn more and support the next generation at OregonFFA.com.
Discount Fireworks Superstore. Get the same amount of fireworks for half the price. Get twice the fireworks for the same price you pay at the other guys. Why would you shop anywhere else? Get all of your favorites: sparklers, screaming patriots, ground blooms, and more. Right now, everything is marked down 40 to 70%. Why go anywhere else? Look for Discount Fireworks Superstore in your area. For Discount Fireworks Superstore locations, plus get free fireworks, log on to dfsfireworks.com or text DFS to 26786.
I'm here today with Dr. Jessica Law Phillips from Kaiser Permanente in Eugene to talk about the importance of annual well visits for women.
A woman's body changes over time. Annual visits allow us to focus on prevention. A physical exam, cervical and breast cancer screenings, blood tests to check health conditions, plus education and counseling to help you make informed decisions. Kaiser Permanente in Eugene is growing to meet your needs. Come see us. Learn more at kp.org/ling.
KEZI is celebrating high school seniors. Submit a photo of your local senior at kezi.com/community, and they may be featured on KEZI 9 News. Plus, each week we'll be giving away a giant pizza from Abby's to one graduating senior. Celebrating high school seniors on KEZI 9 News. Sponsored by Abby's Legendary Pizza.
Welcome back to a special presentation of KEZI 9 News, the Fire Watch forecast from the Stormtracker 9 weather team.
Welcome back. The Oregon Department of Forestry is a crucial organization fighting and mitigating wildfires across Oregon. And while we've seen wetter and cooler conditions this winter, the drier start to the summer is posing some concern.
Last fire season started off very similar to this year.
ironically in the exact same spot. The Upper Applegate Fire of 2024 in Jackson County started on June 20th within 2 days of the Upper Applegate Fire of 2025, which started on June 18th. Stats just like that make officials weary, especially after the 1.9 million acres that were burned last year.
It's lining up similar, but I think it's a little early. I mean, so you think about, you drive around town and you look at people's yards, they're already dead. That's usually something you see at the end of July.
As comparison, this time last year, we were drought-free across the entire state of Oregon. This year, parts in severe drought, about 3 weeks ahead of the time of year we typically enter the dry season.
So for this year, we think it's going to be busy, especially late season. You know, you hit that August and September time frame. In September, if we think back to 2020, that was the big wind event. There's always an east wind possibility. Hopefully it's never that strong again, but we have to prepare for that.
Preparing more so this year, which makes 5 years since that historic wind event that followed a record drought and fanned the flames of the Labor Day fires, which made fighting them nearly impossible and ultimately left the entire communities like Blue River and Detroit in rubble.
You know, that was an anomaly event, I hope. You know, every fall we get east winds. Hopefully they're not that strong ever again.
So how do you prepare for a season like 2020?
One of the ways we do that is, you know, we have to hire staff. A lot of our firefighters are seasonal positions, and we put a lot of effort into training those folks.
So whether 2020, 2024, or 2025, ODF has learned a lot over the recent fire years. They're ready. Are you? Dry lightning. A lot of us love to hear the dramatic sounds and kind of see the beautiful light show of a thunderstorm. But in the summer months, they can be particularly hazardous for wildfire season. Cameron's here and took a look at some of the science behind the phenomenon.
One of the most common causes of natural wildfires in the Pacific Northwest is dry lightning. Now, what does that mean and how does it happen? Well, rising motions in the atmosphere produce clouds. And clouds, when they get tall enough and wet enough, they turn into rainfall. Those are rain clouds. If they get even taller than that and the updrafts are strong enough, then you can generate a charge inside the cloud and that gets released as lightning. Now there's cloud-to-cloud strikes and cloud-to-ground strikes. Cloud-to-ground strikes are fine as long as the surface that those lightning strikes are hitting is wet. But during the summer months, we end up with extended periods of warm and dry conditions, and that builds up a dry zone between those clouds and down towards the surface. And any of the rainfall that moves through that dry zone, well, it can evaporate. So sometimes you end up with situations where none of that rainfall hits the ground at all, and now you have lightning strikes hitting the dry ground. And of course, we know that does not bode well for wildfires. Like I said, it's one of the most common of the ignition sources here in Western Oregon.
This fire season could be a lot sooner and different than last year. And we'll get to that in our Stormtracker forecast in just a minute. But first, we need to understand how wildfires work and how that relates to the weather. Cameron is here again and took a look at the science behind fire.
Let's talk about the dynamics of wildfires, how they happen and what makes them spread and become so dangerous. The first thing you need to consider is wildfire weather, and that's going to be hot, dry, and windy. Hot, well, that adds to low humidity, which makes it dry, and dry makes vegetation dry, which acts as the fuel to start that wildfire and keep it burning. That is what's burning in the first place. Now, wind has its own little niche in this entire operation, and that's going to be both spreading out wildfires and giving them more oxygen. And that gets into the rest of the components here. So oxygen, like I just said, this is a burning reaction, so you need to continuously feed oxygen into the fire to keep it burning. Otherwise, it'll choke out. Fuel, that's going to be the dry vegetation, and that comes in all different shapes and sizes. You can have very small fuels, which are dry grasses and things like that, or huge fuels like the dry trees we see behind me. A heat source, now that can be anything from a cigarette butt to some sparks off the back of a vehicle, or even a lightning strike. And speaking of a lightning strike, our example today starts with that. You can see we've got our first ignition started there in some of those dry grasses, and then there's a little bit of a push. Now that push is happening because of the winds, and that's going to help to transport what are called firebrands, which are essentially just little burning embers all over into these neighboring trees. Trees have a particularly dangerous way of spreading called torching, which is when you have a firebrand land somewhere close to the bottom, it burns up the tree and then around the entire canopy, which is what we're seeing here. And if you have multiple ignition sources like all those other lightning strikes, it really spreads this around because it happens in multiple areas, and then you have a gigantic fire complex that happens after. Now, if you are near an area where there could be a wildfire, you got to be ready to listen to your local fire authority. They'll tell you if and when you need to evacuate, and if it's time for that evacuation, it helps to be ready beforehand. Get everything that you could need for evacuation and put it into your vehicle because you might not be able to come back. Still ahead tonight on this special edition of KEZI 9 News, our official Stormtracker 9 fire season outlook for Oregon and the entire Northwest. You don't want to miss it.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored by Keep Oregon Green.
If your plans include camping this summer, watch that campfire. It poses a wildfire risk when done wrong. First, check to make sure campfires are allowed. Use your campsite's metal fire ring or create a rock one and clear away any dry vegetation that could ignite with a spark. Keep water in a shovel at the ready, and when you're finished, drown the fire with water and stir the ashes. Repeat this process until you can't feel any heat with the back of your hand. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. Prevent wildfires with the Oregon Department of Forestry. Together, we can keep Oregon green.
Which automaker employs the most hourly workers in the country? Ford. Which automaker assembles the most vehicles in the country? Ford. It's a commitment Ford dealers share by offering employee pricing across a full lineup of Ford vehicles.
Get the news at the speed of your fingertips. Lookout Eugene Springfield, with the largest newsroom in Lane County, is here offering you dozens of stories every week. News, columns, guides, calendars, and lots more. Just download our easy-to-use app through the Apple or Google Play stores and get the news on your home screen updated throughout the day. Lookout's app. It's what your friends and neighbors are now turning to. Get trustworthy news when you want it via our app or at lookouteugene-springfield.com. Know more every day.
Hold on tight, Eugene. The most electrifying event of the summer is back, and we've added a carnival. The Eugene Pro Rodeo will have non-stop action, some of the nation's best cowboys, barrel racing, bull riding, carnival, and more. Every night is packed with thrills, and the 4th of July will blow the roof off with a massive fireworks show. Get your boots on and buy your tickets at EugeneProRodeo.com. The Eugene Pro Rodeo. Buckle up. It's gonna be wild.
Kendall Auto presents the Kids Sports Celebrity Softball Game, a star-studded evening of home runs, highlights, and hometown pride. Enjoy an all-star lineup of past and present athletes, featuring Oregon's own quarterback Dante Moore and two-sport standout Bryce Betcher. Proceeds provide scholarships to local kids who otherwise couldn't afford to play. Get your tickets today at kidsports.org and support local kids. The Kids Sports Celebrity Softball Game, Saturday, July 12th at Jane Sanders Stadium.
KEZI 9 News at 11 p.m. Get you caught up on the most important stories every day. Stay up for live, local, late-breaking news coverage.
Take a break from that old lemon. Let's go to the park.
I can't. I got to replace the starter and brakes if it's ever going to sell.
I'm starting to think the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this whole thing.
Well, what do we do?
When the juice isn't worth the squeeze, let St. Vinny's make lemonade. Donate any vehicle, lemon or not, to support St. Vincent de Paul community programs. We handle the paperwork and provide a tax write-off. Together, let's drive change and help the community, one car at a time.
Which automaker employs the most hourly workers in the country? Ford. Which automaker assembles the most vehicles in the country? Ford. It's a commitment Ford dealers share by offering employee pricing across a full lineup of Ford vehicles.
Welcome back. It's time for our forecast of the fire season. I know it's not probably the most sought after forecast of the season, but we're going to get into those details.
Sure, of course. And we all know that hot, dry, windy are the big problems here, but there's a little bit more to it than just that. So
exactly. And this year is a little bit different. So let's take a look at the snowpack right now. This was at the max. This is on April 1st. And the key about this year is, yes, all of these numbers were great, and particularly across Southwest Oregon. They had some of the best snowpack and rainfall this season. But one of the biggest things this year is all of those regions have seen a very quick runoff. And we went from around full capacity down to 90 to 92% of that here in the past month or so. So that, again, is a concern for sure. Now, here's a look at the latest drought monitor where you can kind of see the areas where we're seeing the driest conditions.
Yeah, of course. So you see the legend there, and clearly it looks like the driest areas are actually out towards the coastal regions this time around, specifically up towards Portland. Of course, we have that little severe region, but any drought is not good. And like we were just talking about, that snowpack melting so much faster means that this is likely to be a lot worse later into the season. So we probably have some of the more extreme conditions as we get later down the line.
Yeah, and that's a big key too, is that we are seeing these dry conditions, and this time last year, we weren't even in a drought.
And of course, you can always have something explosive that happens. You've got your dark horse, an east wind event. You can blow all those hot and dry winds over the Cascades and they'll collapse down. And of course, that's bad news here.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to be watching that very closely, but we appreciate you joining us. And remember, humans are the #1 cause of wildfires, so be safe.
The Fire Watch forecast is sponsored by